Hey guys, tonight we drift beneath a velvet dome of stars where the wind hums lullabies in forgotten tongues and moonlight spills across mosaic tiles. You're in a palace that never quite feels still, where even the shadows lean in to listen. Somewhere past the courtyard, through columns carved with looping scripts, a young woman in silk sits cross-legged reading by a single flickering flame. The air smells faintly of sandalwood and old parchment. Her fingers tremble over a scroll she wasn't supposed to touch, its ink still glossy with secrets no one remembers asking for. She's the Sultan's favorite daughter, not that you'd know from her quiet defiance. She prefers scrolls to jewels, questions to ceremony, and tends to sneak away from royal banquets claiming a headache, when in truth, she's translating ancient spells in her moonlit chamber. You might think being royalty is all peacocks and pomegranates, but between the arranged meetings, gold-threaded gossip, and being shadowed by guards who pretend not to hear you swear, it's exhausting. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and local time in the comments. I'm always curious who's out there drifting off with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The palace known by some as Zahir's Rest was built to echo. Not by accident, architects from far lands shaped its halls to carry whispers from one room to another. That way, a good story or a bad plot never stayed secret long. At night, the building breathes with the heat it absorbed by day, creaking gently like a camel deciding whether to rise. You follow her steps through arched doorways, past oil lamps that flicker in ways that feel intentional. She pauses at an old cedar chest. Beneath folded silks and a ridiculously embroidered cushion lies a scroll wrapped in a thin cloth. This is her fourth night reading it, and each time it seems longer. The story supposedly tells of a war between two cities, erased by winds from within the sand. You'd expect drama, but the tone is dull. So dull, in fact, some historians claim it was written that way on purpose to lull prisoners to sleep during transport. Still, there's something about the way certain phrases keep echoing in her head. Phrases like those whose hearts beat after embalming, or he who speaks in the absence of lungs. Oh, and here's your quirky tidbit of the night. Did you know ancient Egyptian cosmetics often included powdered malachite and lead, because nothing says beauty like mild neurological poisoning. Tonight, however, the palace seems unusually quiet. Even the musicians in the outer hall have stopped plucking their lutes. A breeze lifts the corner of the scroll. She freezes, not because of the draft, but because the air smells wrong. Less like incense, more like dust from somewhere very old. She listens. Far away, a door opens, or closes, or maybe the sound came from inside the scroll. She glances out the narrow window. The moon is full. A smear of cloud drifts across it like a curtain drawn by unseen hands. You know that feeling when you suddenly remember a dream you didn't know you had. That's what her face looks like now, somewhere between recognition and regret. Outside her room, the corridor stretches like a throat swallowing the lamplight. Her sandals whisper against the floor as she steps out. A cat darts past, possibly hers. Possibly just one of the many palace strays that seem to appear in photos of important moments centuries later, as if posing. She walks toward the room where the mummy was placed, a recent gift from the priest kings of Thebes. Diplomacy by way of the dead, not unusual in those days. In fact, many alliances were sealed with gifts of relics, including preserved bodies believed to offer protection, or in less polite circles, revenge. Historians still argue whether the practice was symbolic, or as some suggest, a way to dump cursed objects onto rival courts. Sort of like a very ancient regifting, except instead of ugly sweaters, it was eternally screaming souls. The daughter pauses at the chamber door. It's ajar. The guards who should be posted there are nowhere in sight. The torch nearest the door has burned low, casting shadows that seem to lean outward rather than in. She doesn't enter, not tonight. Instead, she turns, walks back to her room, and pretends nothing's wrong. A classic royal survival tactic, honestly. Later in her dreams, she will hear sand shifting inside silk, and something trying very hard to breathe through linen. You wake, or rather float, into the following evening, because time in this palace doesn't march so much as it lounges like a spoiled cat. Somewhere near the central courtyard, fountains gurgle lazily under the scent of orange blossoms, and palace servants trade theories in whispers over steaming trays of mint tea. Word is spreading the Theban gift has moved. Not dramatically, mind you. No glowing eyes, no thunderclaps, no hieroglyphs leaping off the walls. Just a change, a subtle repositioning, one that only the steward noticed when preparing the ceremonial incense this morning. The mummy now lies at a slightly different angle, with one wrapped hand bent slightly inward, as though clutching something, which, to be clear, it wasn't yesterday. You follow the daughter again, still sleepless, still driven by something between curiosity and instinct. She moves through the palace like someone tiptoeing across a dream they don't want to wake up from. The chamber is cold despite the desert heat. A single brazier smolders in the corner, doing nothing useful except make the shadows twitch. The mummy lies in a stone sarcophagus inlaid with lapis lazuli and dull gold standard diplomatic flair. Except this one has no inscriptions, just a single scarab carved into the lid's center, the wings stretched too wide, almost as if the artist didn't understand beetle anatomy. The Sultan had been pleased when the mummy first arrived, considering it a fine gesture from Thebes. They respect our lineage, he'd said, over lamb skewers. They acknowledge our divine bloodline, which was generous given the two regions had been at war as recently as 3 generations ago. Historically, exchanging mummies as diplomatic offerings wasn't unheard of. In fact, records show that rulers often used such gifts to either impress or subtly threaten neighboring courts. A mummy with certain markings might signal peace or vengeance. Historians still argue whether the practice was born from reverence or passive-aggressive sorcery. Anyway, the problem with this particular mummy isn't what it is, but what it might still want. You move closer, its linen wrappings are old, frayed, in some places strangely intact in others. The scent is no longer just dust and resin. It's richer now, earthier, like something buried too shallow. A court attendant enters behind you, muttering about oil levels and temperature regulation. He freezes when he sees the mummy's hand. He was there yesterday. It was flat. He's sure. The two of you stare in silence, both pretending this is normal. He eventually backs out without finishing his sentence. Meanwhile, in another wing of the palace, a chamberlain is reviewing the shipping scrolls. The crate arrived 3 weeks ago, was unsealed 5 days later, and there's no record of who requested the gift in the first place. Not in ink, anyway. Just a thumbprint pressed in red dye at the bottom of the order, too smudged to trace. That night, you attend a quiet dinner in the royal courtyard. The Sultan's daughter arrives late, wearing indigo robes with silver cuffs, her hair wrapped loosely. She avoids the eyes of every scholar seated around the fountain. The meal is simple: honeyed carrots, roast pigeon, and a thick date paste that tastes like compressed autumn. You chew slowly, because apparently mummified curses require full digestion to activate. Someone asks if she's seen the sarcophagus again. She nods but says nothing. Instead, she tells a story about how Thebes once banned the eating of fish near the river because it offended one of their water deities, who incidentally preferred fried locusts. No one laughs. Even the court jester remains unusually quiet, tapping his fork against a melon rind. And here comes your quirky historical tidbit. The ancient Egyptians believed that onions were a source of eternal life, so they often buried mummies with whole onions pressed against their chests. Imagine waking up after 3,000 years smelling like a stir-fry. Later, as the sky darkens into cobalt, you hear soft music rising from somewhere behind the marble columns. Oud strings slow and meandering. You follow it, half hoping it leads to distraction. Instead, you find a group of court musicians frozen mid-rehearsal. They're staring at a statue. The statue wasn't there yesterday. It's carved from dark stone about the size of a child, shaped like a kneeling figure with no eyes, only a smooth curve where the face should be like melted wax. One of the musicians swears it was facing north when they arrived. Now it points directly toward the royal quarters. No one wants to be the one to call it a sign, but you can feel it, the air's gone heavy, like a breath being held far too long. That evening, the daughter returns to the chamber. You're behind her this time, careful not to make a sound. She kneels beside the sarcophagus, pressing her hand near the beetle carving. Nothing moves. She whispers a name you don't quite catch, but it makes the flame in the brazier sputter, once then grow stronger. A thin, dry voice echoes, not a word, just a vowel. One long, ancient sigh curling up through centuries of linen. You both leave, but as you turn, you notice something. The wrapped hand. It's flat again. By the time morning stains the palace with saffron, light rumors have soaked into every corridor like spilled ink. Servants pretend not to speak of it, guards tighten their patrols, and someone's hung a charm of braided garlic and lapis over the mummy chamber door, not for scent, but for protection, though no one wants to say from what. You're trailing the court astrologer today, which is exactly as boring as it sounds, until it isn't. He's a gaunt man with fingers stained in indigo and gold dust, perpetually sniffing a clove-studded lemon as if he suspects poison in every breath. You find him hunched over a massive celestial chart made from camel hide parchment, muttering about eclipses that never happened and stars that blinked out mid-rotation. According to him, the moment the mummy arrived, Venus began dragging her heels. That's astrologer speak for bad juju. He invites the Sultan's daughter politely because she outranks him to visit his observatory. It's a creaky tower that smells like mildew and old figs packed with dusty astrolabes and one suspiciously cracked telescope. From the tower's top, you can see half the kingdom and also, disturbingly, a flock of crows circling over the same courtyard every night like it's a habit. He tells her that a once-in-a-century planetary alignment is due within days. A gate will open, he murmurs. Or something will come through one already open, which is basically just astrologer code for I don't know, but it'll probably be creepy. You glance at the scrolls he's using. One appears to be written in the wrong direction, its ink faded only in the center, as if read too many times by invisible eyes. The daughter, ever calm, asks about the crescent-shaped symbol at the top. He pauses, then says something vague about it, meaning the echo that refuses to fade. Quirky fact break, ancient Egyptian sleep remedies sometimes involved crocodile dung mixed with honey smeared under the pillow to ward off evil dreams. Historians still argue whether this worked or simply encouraged people to sleep farther away from their beds. That afternoon, a court healer stops by the princess's chamber uninvited. He's carrying a pouch of dried herbs and a pot of resin with alarming color. He suggests it's a spiritual steam bath, which mostly involves sitting in a ceramic tent and inhaling boiling vinegar fumes. The daughter politely declines. You, however, remain curious enough to peek into the healer's kit, only to find several items that have no clear medicinal use, including a strip of mummy linen that by palace records should have remained inside the sealed chamber. You don't ask questions. You're sleepy, not stupid. Meanwhile, a scribe reports something odd. The scroll the daughter's been reading has changed again. A line she copied by candlelight last week is now gone, replaced with a single hieroglyph of a hollow circle surrounded by teeth. No one knows what it means. One scholar suggests it's a rare symbol for hungering silence. Another insists it's a decorative seal. A third says, I'm going on vacation. You can't really blame him. Later that night, in a small salon lit by hanging brass lanterns, the princess invites a few trusted companions to talk. Among them, a linguist, a former embalmer turned painter, and the astrologer, still holding his clove lemon like a holy relic. Over plates of sugared almonds and date cakes, they swap theories. Maybe the mummy isn't the threat the painter says. Maybe it's the thing that follows mummies. Or the thing that wants them back, adds the astrologer. The linguist, half drunk on honeyed wine, points out that certain Egyptian myths speak of guardians, creatures, or spirits meant to watch the dead and punish those who move them. Sort of like a spiritual customs officer, but with more teeth. Historians still argue whether these stories were metaphorical warnings about grave robbing or records of actual curses that behaved far too literally. As the conversation wanes, the daughter grows quiet. She fingers the cuff of her robe, deep in thought. Then she asks, almost to herself, what if it was never buried in the first place? What if it was placed here to find something? Everyone goes still. There's a silence so full it feels like a pause in music, like the note just before the drop. Then far off in the distance you hear a sound. Not quite a scream, more like a yawn from a throat too dry to manage either. The daughter stands. I need to see the sarcophagus, she says. You follow. The palace at night feels like a body that's forgotten how to breathe. You pad along mosaic floors where shadows lean in unnatural directions and distant fountains now gurgle with something less like water, more like waiting. The torches lining the main corridor flicker in a syncopated rhythm as if responding to some private music echoing between stone and silence. The Sultan's daughter walks with purpose, barefoot, no jewelry, no guards. She's dressed simply wrapped in a black linen robe that sways like a thought not yet spoken. You trail a few paces behind, as if even your presence could disturb the balance of something ancient and watching. She turns a corner. The corridor narrows, lit now by only a single lamp left burning low. The door to the mummy chamber stands half open. Inside, the sarcophagus looks unchanged, except you know better now. The gold edging is no longer flush with the stone base, just a sliver, the tiniest misalignment, but enough to suggest the lid has shifted, not removed, not thrown aside in a dramatic movie gesture, just nudged, gently, purposefully, like a breath inhaled and held. The daughter approaches it and places her hand on the lid. It's warm. Not dessert warm, body warm. Here's your quirky history fact to chew on. While that sinks in, some ancient embalmers were so precise with their preservation techniques that mummies have been found with intact internal organs after over 2,000 years. One even had a heartbeat rhythm still detectable via tissue mapping, though to be fair, historians still argue whether that's science or just someone's wishful misread of an MRI. A scraping sound interrupts your thoughts. Not loud but distinct, linen brushing against stone. You hold your breath. So does she. No one speaks. Then she kneels right there next to the thing and begins to whisper. Not in Arabic, not even in hieratic Egyptian. It's a tongue you don't know, composed of breathy consonants and long round vowels that make your skin goosebump in places you didn't know could goosebump. The air thickens like steam without heat. You glance at the door. Still open, still safe, technically. Then the mummy moves. No leap, no jolt, just the slightest twitch of a foot inside the wrappings. Enough to knock loose a grain or two of ancient resin, which lands on the marble with a sound like a drop of blood echoing inside a vase. She doesn't flinch. Instead, she asks it a question. You don't hear it. Maybe it wasn't spoken aloud. Maybe it was just thought hard enough. And the mummy answers. Not in voice, but in scent. The chamber fills with the unmistakable aroma of fresh-cut lotus. Impossible. Out of season. Out of century. The kind of scent that means something has woken up or returned. She bows her head, whispers a second question. You start to get dizzy, and you're not the only one. A guard appears in the doorway behind you. He sees the seen princess sarcophagus you pale as almond milk and turns a respectful 180 degrees back out the door. Smart man. Here's your mainstream history moment. Embalming rituals in the 18th dynasty often involved spells to separate a person's identity from their physical remains, ensuring the body would stay dead, even if the soul went walkabout. Sort of like spiritual two-factor authentication. But some scrolls, like the kind she's been reading, hint at the reverse process using identity to reanimate form. No one wrote down why anyone would do this. Probably because they were too busy running. She rises, walks calmly to the brazier, and tosses in a pinch of black powder from a small ivory jar. The flames flare green, just for a moment, enough to illuminate the entire sarcophagus and something pressed into the linen over its chest. A seal, circular, metallic, not gold, not silver, something else, something wet. She says almost conversationally, it was never embalmed properly. You blink. What? It's not a mummy, she replies, her voice flat. It's a vessel. You don't ask for clarification. She doesn't offer it. You exit the chamber. Sleep that night comes slowly like sinking into honey. In your dreams, you see 1,000 sarcophagi opening in perfect silence, and the whisper that follows isn't air, but intention. The next morning feels thinner somehow, as if the night swallowed more than just dreams. You find yourself wandering toward the daughter's favorite courtyard, where sunlight spills over ancient stonework, and the scent of jasmine flickers like a timid flame. The palace is waking, but a strange stillness clings to the air, like a secret, waiting to be spilled. As you cross the tiled pathway, a small crowd has gathered near the fountain. The Sultan's favorite cat, a sleek black creature with eyes too bright for any feline, sits perched atop the stone edge. The odd thing, it's soaked in fine desert sand, despite the absence of any breeze strong enough to carry it. You recall the tales of cats in Egyptian lore, sacred protectors, revered companions of the gods, and sometimes messengers between worlds. but this cat's stare feels unsettling, almost human in its depth. You swear it watches you longer than necessary, like it knows something you don't. The princess arrives quietly observing the scene. She kneels beside the cat, brushing the sand from its fur with gentle fingers. You notice a faint shimmer in the creature's eyes, a flicker that feels like warning or invitation. Historically, cats were often buried with their owners in ancient Egypt, believed to guard souls in the afterlife. Some tombs even reveal cats wearing jewelry or intricate collars, symbols of their esteemed status. Historians still argue whether cats were truly worshipped or simply convenient scapegoats when crops failed or pests ran rampant. The princess shares a curious story with you, how once a cat vanished from a temple in Thebes and returned days later carrying a strange amulet in its mouth. The amulet bore a symbol not found in any known language, a spiral that seemed to pulse with energy. Scholars debated its origin, with some suggesting it was a gift from the underworld itself. As you listen, the cat suddenly leaps from the fountain and darts through the palace gardens, disappearing behind a wall of ivy and pomegranate trees. Without hesitation, the princess follows. You trail after them, stepping lightly through fragrant foliage. The garden feels less like a refuge and more like a threshold between worlds. There's a coolness under the sun, as if shade from unseen wings protects this hidden place. In a secluded alcove, you find the cat crouched beside a small, ornate box carved from ebony and inlaid with turquoise. The lid is slightly ajar, revealing a tangle of ancient linens and faded jewels. The princess picks up the box, carefully running her fingers over strange hieroglyphs. She whispers this was never meant to be found. And that's when the air shifts again, heavier charged. You notice movement out of the corner of your eye. A shadow, elongated and slow, slides past the wall. The cat's ears twitch, its gaze narrowing. Quirky historical aside, some mummies were wrapped not only in linen, but also in layers of resin, mixed with herbs thought to repel evil spirits, including frankincense and myrrh. But others were bound in materials said to trap spirits inside, making the mummy less a protector and more a prison. Historians still debate whether these practices were practical preservation techniques or metaphysical experiments. The princess turns to you, eyes wide, voice barely above a whisper. We're running out of time. You can almost hear the slow grinding of ancient wheels turning somewhere beneath the sand's wheels of fate, or perhaps the wheels of a curse long forgotten. The banquet hall smells of roasted lamb spiced with cinnamon and coriander, but you barely taste it. The chatter is polite, but beneath the polite clinks of goblets filled with fermented camel's milk, an undercurrent of tension flows like a silent river. The Sultan's daughter sits at the far end of the long table, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the carved edge of her goblet. Around her, scholars and courtiers murmur about the latest strange happenings. You lean in as she begins to recount a dream she had the night before, one filled with endless sandstorms, hidden chambers, and voices calling from beneath the earth. Her voice is calm, but carries a weight that silences even the most boisterous. One scholar, an older man with a beard tangled like desert brush, nods thoughtfully and whispers about the Valley of the Kings, a place where pharaohs and queens sleep in labyrinthine tombs filled with traps and curses. He warns that the unrest might be tied to the restless spirits there. Historians still argue whether these tombs were designed to protect treasures or to imprison souls. Some say the curses were real, others claim they were clever warnings to keep grave robbers away. Across the room, the court jester makes a not-so-subtle joke about the mummy getting bored in its new home and looking for a midnight snack. A few forced laughs ripple through the crowd, but your eyes catch the princess's steely gaze. She's no fool, and neither are the others. You notice the presence of fermented camel's milk, a staple of desert banquets which scholars say was believed to enhance dreams and visions. Whether it's true or just a trick of the tongue, you find yourself feeling oddly lightheaded. Later, the daughter steals away to the balcony where the warm night air is thick with the scent of date palms and jasmine. She watches the stars tracing constellations that have guided travelers and kings for millennia. She confides in you about the stories her mother told her about buried kings who loved deeply in life and fiercely in death. About a curse laid not on enemies, but on those who dared to forget them. Just then, a soft rustle draws your attention. The The princess's royal falcon, usually perched quietly nearby, suddenly breaks into a frantic scream, a sound uncannily human echoing off the stone walls. Quirky fact, falcons were sacred to the Egyptian god Horus, symbolizing protection and kingship. But there are tales of falcons screaming warnings before disasters, which some historians dismiss as superstition, though many local legends beg to differ. The princess tenses, staring into the darkness where the falcon's piercing cries trail off. She whispers, "Something's coming," and tonight you'll learn that not all shadows are cast by the setting sun. You find yourself navigating the maze-like corridors of the palace's oldest wing, where dust dances in shafts of fading sunlight, and the scent of ancient cedar lingers like a whispered promise. The walls here are thick, carved with faded symbols that tell stories you can almost hear if you listen closely enough, tales of forgotten gods and rulers who once commanded the desert's secrets. The princess leads the way, her footsteps light but purposeful. Tonight, curiosity has overcome caution. She reveals to you a hidden door, cleverly disguised behind a tapestry depicting the lotus flower, the emblem of rebirth. The fabric feels worn, almost like it resists being moved, as if aware that what lies behind should stay hidden. With a gentle tug, the tapestry falls away, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. The air that escapes smells damp and cold, a stark contrast to the dry heat above. You both exchange a glance but say nothing. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. Historians still debate whether such secret chambers were meant for storage ritual or something far more sinister. Some believe they were built to protect the living from the dead, while others argue they were designed to keep the dead trapped forever. The steps creak underfoot. As you descend, each echo a heartbeat in the quiet. Flickering torchlight reveals ancient murals, faded, but still vivid enough to show scenes of pharaohs communing with gods and spirits crossing the veil between worlds. Midway down, you notice strange markings etched into the stone, triangular shapes intertwined with serpents and eyes that seem to follow your every move. The princess stops and traces a finger along the carvings, whispering a phrase in a language lost to time. The walls seem to respond, the torchlight flickering as if in acknowledgement. Your pulse quickens. Quirky tidbit. In some ancient Egyptian beliefs, serpents symbolized both protection and danger. The uraeus, a rearing cobra, adorned royal crowns as a guardian, but it was also feared as a bringer of death. Historians still argue about the duality of these symbols and their true significance. Deeper you go until you reach a heavy stone door sealed tight with iron bands. The princess presses her palm against the cool surface, and the door groans open as if by unseen hands. Inside, a chamber bathed in golden dust awaits its center, occupied by a pedestal upon which rests a small, ornately carved box. You step inside cautiously. The silence here is profound, broken only by the soft drip of water somewhere distant. She opens the box. Inside lies a collection of scrolls, their papyrus cracked but still legible. One catches your eye, a map marked with cryptic symbols, pointing to a place called the Valley of Wrath. The princess's eyes gleam with determination. "You see this," she says softly. "This might explain everything." And suddenly, the weight of centuries presses down on your shoulders. You carefully unroll the brittle papyrus under the flickering light of a brass oil lamp, the scent of burning sesame oil mingling with the musty aroma of aged parchment. The hieroglyphs are intricate, winding across the page like a serpent chasing its tail. And though some parts have faded or crumbled, enough remains to hint at a terrifying tale. The scroll speaks of the soul-hungering one, a being that exists between worlds, neither alive nor dead, whose hunger for life's essence can never be sated. It tells of a pact forged beneath eclipsed suns, an ancient bargain meant to protect the kingdom, but cursed to bind the bearer forever. You glance at the princess, whose eyes never leave the text. Her fingers trace the words delicately, as if touching them could awaken what they describe. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the desert night pressing against the palace walls. Historians still argue whether such pacts were metaphorical warnings or records of real mystical dealings. Some think these texts serve to enforce obedience to rulers, while others whisper that the ancient Egyptians truly believed in these shadowed bargains. A faint noise draws your attention. The chamber's heavy stone door creaks, and a shadow slips inside. It's the princess's favorite cat, the same one you saw covered in sand days ago. The feline's eyes gleam unnaturally in the lamplight, reflecting something ancient and knowing. The scroll's narrative mentions creatures that serve the soul-hungering one, shapeshifters that travel the veil between life and death. Could the cat be one? You're about to ask when the princess hushes you with a finger pressed to her lips. She stands closing the scroll carefully and wrapping it in silk. "This is just the beginning," she says. Quirky fact: ancient Egyptians sometimes inscribed spells on mummy wrappings to protect the body and trap the spirit within. However, some believed these spells could backfire, causing restless spirits to seek vengeance. Historians still debate how literal these beliefs were and how much was ritual theater. As you prepare to leave the chamber, a sudden gust of wind extinguishes the lamp. The room falls into total darkness, except for the glowing eyes of the cat now sitting on the threshold as if guarding the passage. You can't shake the feeling that something unseen has moved closer. Outside, the night wind whistles, carrying a promise you'd rather ignore. The dawn breaks soft and pale, casting long, gentle shadows over the palace's worn stonework. Yet something feels off, as if the night's whispers lingered too long, refusing to yield to morning's warmth. You step out into the courtyard, where the usual symphony of birdsong is strangely absent, replaced by a hush that wraps around the palace like a thick veil. Suddenly, a sharp cry slices through the silence. It's the royal falcon perched high on a sun-bleached column, its wings spread wide, as if preparing to take flight. But the sound it emits is uncanny, a piercing screech that almost sounds like a human wail, chilling and desperate. You watch as the falcon's eyes lock onto something just beyond your sight. The princess arrives beside you, her face pale but composed. The falcon has been restless since the mummy's arrival, she says quietly. In our legends, falcons are the eyes of Horus, protectors of the king. When they cry like this, it means danger is near. You recall that falcons held immense significance in Egyptian culture, often symbolizing divine protection and royal authority. Some believed their cries could forewarn of calamity. Historians still argue whether these stories are mere mythology or rooted in ancient observations of falcon behavior. The princess leads you toward the edge of the gardens, where the falcon suddenly takes flight, soaring low and fast, toward the palace's oldest walls. As it disappears into a narrow alleyway, you notice a faint trail of sand swirling in its wake, unusual for such a still morning. Following the bird's path, you arrive at a secluded alcove shrouded in ivy and shadow. There, half buried beneath a layer of dust and dried leaves, lies an ornate box carved from ebony and inlaid with turquoise, its lid slightly ajar. The cat from before pads silently toward the box nose, twitching as it examines the object. The princess kneels and gently opens the box, fully revealing a tangle of ancient linens intertwined with faded jewels. The air grows heavy with the scent of myrrh and something older, something that smells of forgotten curses. Quirky fact: some tombs contained amulets believed to bind restless spirits, crafted in shapes representing protection or imprisonment. These objects often held mysterious powers, and historians still debate whether their magic was symbolic or believed to be genuinely effective. As the princess lifts an amulet from the box, the air shifts, the temperature drops, and shadows seem to lengthen unnaturally. The cat's fur bristles, its eyes narrowing to slits. "We're closer than ever to the truth," the princess whispers. And, somewhere beneath the sands, a secret stirs. You find yourself drawn to the marble bathhouse, a serene oasis within the palace where steam rises gently from warm pools, scented with lotus and frankincense. The air feels thick with the mingled aromas, and faint echoes of laughter and soft conversation ripple through the tiled walls. You slip inside, hoping the warmth might calm your restless thoughts. Nearby, a cluster of advisors and courtiers debate in hushed voices, their reflections flickering in the water like ghosts. They argue fervently over what to do about the mummy and the growing unease it has cast over the court. Some urge caution, recommending that the sarcophagus be sealed and buried again, while others insist on burning the remains to break whatever curse might be awakening. You listen as one elderly noble, his voice cracked with age, recalls ancient tales of fiery purifications meant to cleanse not just the body, but the spirit. Yet another, younger and more pragmatic, warns that burning might unleash forces even worse. Historians still argue whether these purification rites were practical attempts at sanitation or symbolic acts meant to protect the living from the dead's wrath. As the debate intensifies, you notice the daughter slipping quietly among the bathers, her eyes thoughtful. She pauses beside a mosaic depicting the god Anubis, guardian of the dead, and touches the tiles gently, as if seeking guidance. Suddenly, a court magician enters carrying a bundle of incense and chanting softly. He begins to circle the baths, scattering salt and herbs, his voice rising in a rhythmic cadence. The bathhouse fills with thick smoke, curling like serpents in the warm air. A hush falls. Even the water seems to hold its breath. Quirky tidbit salt circles were commonly drawn to ward off evil spirits in many cultures, including ancient Egypt, where salt was believed to purify and protect. Some historians debate how widespread this practice was, or whether it was limited to specific regions or rituals. The princess watches intently, then turns to you with a somber expression. "We cannot destroy what was never truly dead," she says, "but we might bind it." As the magician's chant reaches a crescendo, you feel a ripple in the air, as if something unseen recoils from the sacred smoke. Outside the palace, night-deepened shadows lengthen, and somewhere the mummy stirs again. Tonight, the corridors of the harem feel alive in ways you've never noticed before. The flicker of lanterns casts shifting patterns on the walls, and the scent of rosewater mingles with something darker, like the echo of footsteps, not your own. You follow the princess as she slips through an archway into the women's quarters, where velvet cushions and low tables laden with sweets give the place an almost festive air. Yet the laughter here is muted, as if everyone remembers a punchline they no longer want to share. At the center of the chamber stands a gilded mirror, its frame carved with interlaced lotuses and papyrus reeds. This is the same mirror where the princess once saw something dance behind her reflection, a figure draped in what looked like her grandmother's anklets moving in a rhythm that no mortal's feet could trace. Historians still argue whether these mirrors were used in mourning rituals to commune with ancestors or merely decorative windows to vanity. Tonight, the mirror waits empty. You and the princess approach it side by side. Her heartbeat echoing in her ears, she reaches out and brushes the glass. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, as her fingertip grazes the surface, the reflection shifts. Not your own, but hers and hers alone. In the glass, she stands dressed in ancient finery, a white linen sheath stiff with resin, a broad collar of lapis and carnelian, and those anklets' tiny bells gilded in gold. "Remember that story of Queen Nefertari's mirror," she whispers. "They say she trapped her sister's spirit inside it to keep her close after death." You shiver at the thought. The mirror warms under her touch, though the air remains cool. Suddenly, the bells on those reflected anklets begin to jingle softly at first, then louder, as if driven by a dancer's eager steps. You glance around, but the room is empty. The other women sleep behind silken curtains. Even the eunuchs, sworn to obedience, would never enter this sacred space uninvited. The princess lifts her hand, and the reflected figure raises hers in response. Then it steps forward, glides across the mirrored chamber floor. Its movement is graceful, otherworldly. Each bell-tinged footfall sounds in your mind like a heartbeat, laced with memory. Quirky historical notes: some harem mirrors were rumored to double as portals for spirit visitations during lunar ceremonies, especially among royal women seeking counsel from their foremothers. Historians still debate whether this was real practice or later legend. You step closer, drawn in spite of yourself. The mirrored princess tilts her head, eyes filled with an expression both loving and sorrowful, an echo of a bond that death could not sever. The bells grow louder, and you swear you feel a breeze brushing your neck, though the air is still. Then, without warning, the reflected figure turns and beckons. You hesitate. Something deep in your chest tightens. The princess tilts her head toward you, eyes wide. "Should we follow?" Before you can answer, a soft, rasping voice murmurs from behind the mirror's breadth, a single phrase in ancient Egyptian, unintelligible, yet unmistakably urgent. The princess's face pales. She recognizes the words. You don't, but your muscles tense. The bells cease. The airflow stills. For a moment, the room holds its breath. Then the mirror's surface ripples like water stirred by a pebble. The reflected princess smiles an expression far too knowing and steps toward you. The glass seems to liquefy the edge of the frame, melting inviting. Your skin prickles with the weight of centuries. You think of the mummy, the hidden pact, the cat's glowing eyes. You think of all the warnings you've ignored. Historians still argue whether these stories of mirror portals were cautionary tales or records of real danger. Either way, you realize you're standing at the threshold of something that can't be undone. The princess takes a steadying breath and reaches out again, this time for your hand. Together, she whispers, and you do the only thing that feels right. You grasp her fingers and step forward into the glass, into the past, into whatever waits beyond. You awaken in a corridor lit by twilight's echo, the marble walls glowing faintly as if breathing. The air feels thick with anticipation, like the moment before a secret reveals itself. You're beside the princess again, both of you drawn toward the mummy chamber by a whisper of movement that only you can hear, as if the building itself nudges you forward. When you arrive, the sarcophagus lid lies exactly as you left it, except for the hieroglyphs etched around its edge. They've changed. You lean in close, reading the new lines, symbols twisting into unfamiliar shapes, telling a story you never saw before. It speaks of the return of fractured souls and the breaking of silent bindings. The script shifts again under your gaze, letters rearranging as if alive. One moment, it names the princess's grandmother. Another moment, it warns of hungry echoes. Historians still argue whether such phenomena were mere copyist errors over centuries, or actual records of living ink spells meant to writhe beyond mortal control. Either way, you're witnessing something that defies every law you thought you knew. A small dry laugh escapes your lips, part sarcasm, part disbelief. The princess leans over, pointing at a hieroglyph. You recognize an eye enclosed in a spiral. That's the Eye of Duat, she murmurs, a symbol of passage between worlds. But this spiral eye is different. It drips in the stone like melted glass. Quirky tidbits: some temple priests carved hieroglyphs in red ochre to represent the blood of gods, believing the pigment could channel divine energy. Others used varnish-like resins so that under torchlight the symbols seemed to glow. Historians still debate whether these techniques were meant to dazzle worshippers or truly believed to animate the texts. You reach out, pressing a fingertip against a shifting glyph. The moment your skin touches the stone, the room hums a low vibration that resonates in your bones. The brazier's flames flicker violently, then calm, as if soothed by an unseen hand. "What is it saying?" you ask, a voice almost swallowed by the hum. The princess traces a finger across the new script. It speaks of a key in living words. Whatever bound the mummy can only be unlocked by speech that moves itself. A chill winds around you. You recall the sealed scroll she studied in the hidden chamber, the one marked with hungering silence. Could these hieroglyphs be the same silent script now awake? You glance at the sarcophagus lid. A narrow band of metal circles its circumference, carved with names that shift too, letters rearranging themselves into different titles. Guardian, victim, vessel keeper. One moment, the princess is vessel, the next, she is keeper. "It sees us," she whispers, unsettled. Above you, the ceiling seems to pulse, as if the tomb itself inhales. You glance at the walls, mosaics of gods and beasts tilting the figure's eyes, following your movements. The corridor behind you stretches into gloom, and the distant drip-drip of water echoes like slow footsteps. Mainstream fact time. The Great Pyramid's internal chambers contain shafts that point towards specific stars, suggesting rulers were oriented to the heavens in death. Historians still argue whether these alignments were spiritual beacons or practical ventilation. Here, though, nothing appears practical. Words crawl across the stone, refusing to stay put. The princess steps back and pulls a small knife from her sash, an heirloom with a mother-of-pearl handle. She lightly scores the air in front of the sarcophagus, tracing a circle of salt borrowed from last night's bathhouse. The symbols hesitate at the salt's edge, creeping back as if respecting an ancient boundary. You draw a breath, half relieved, half fearful. "We need words, you say, words that bind." She nods, closing her eyes. You remember a phrase from the scroll, something about words once spoken in the dark, now echoing to heal or break. You clear your throat and recite an incantation in hesitant Egyptian, an improvised string of consonants and longs drawn from your memory of the princess's whispered readings. At first, nothing happens. The hieroglyphs quiver but stay. Then the air itself seems to shiver, and a single symbol glows, a small scarab beetle carved silver and embedded in the metal band, now shining like moonlight on water. You press your palm against it. It shifts beneath your skin, warming until you can feel a pulse, not blood, but the heartbeat of something ancient. The princess opens her eyes. It's unlocking, she breathes, but what if it was locked for a reason? A distant crash echoes down the corridor. The chamber's door slams shut, though no wind blew. You and the princess exchange a glance, heartbeats racing in unison. Then the scarab pulses again harder, like a call to action. The metal band retracts into the stone lid with a groan, and the sarcophagus lid clicks, loosening. Your mind races with warnings. Historians caution that opening a sealed tomb without proper rites could unleash forces beyond control. Debate rages whether curses were deterrents mythic or literal, but here, right now, you have a choice. The lid wobbles, revealing a dark cavity. A scent like ozone and damp clay rises, a promise of revelation or doom. You swallow, reaching for the princess's hand. Shall we? She nods, gripping your fingers with determined calm. The scarab's glow fades, leaving only the natural flicker of the brazier. Together, you lift the lid. You wake crouched near the open sarcophagus, the scent of damp earth and ozone still heavy in your nostrils. The princess leans over the dark chamber, her silhouette lit by the brazier's steady glow. Behind you, the corridor stretches into impenetrable shadow, as if daring you to venture further. But right now, your path curves back to the upper palace, toward a sultan unsettled by dreams that bleed into reality. You find him pacing in the royal bedchamber, silk curtains drawn tight against the night. Torches flicker weakly along the walls, struggling to hold back a darkness deeper than any physical absence of light. He seems smaller than you imagined, a ruler accustomed to power, now a man haunted by visions he cannot escape. He turns as you enter, eyes ringed with exhaustion. "You there," he says, voice brittle like cracked parchment. "You've been with my daughter. You've seen what she's seen. Tell me, why does my blood run like sand in my veins?" You swallow, choosing your words. "Your Highness, the tomb's opening has stirred something ancient. Your dreams, they aren't just dreams. They're warnings." He rubs his temples. "I had the same dream 3 nights ago. I stand at the edge of a shifting dune that stretches beyond the horizon. My feet sink with each step until I'm submerged, drowning in sand. I feel the weight of every grain pressing on my chest." He pauses, voice trembling. "And then I wake choking." You nod slowly. The dream echoes one recorded on a fragment of papyrus discovered in a lost Theban vault, a prophecy of rulers swallowed by the very earth they claim to command. Scholars argue whether it described a literal catastrophe or a metaphor for political collapse. Either way, it never ends well. Quirky history tidbit Pharaoh Seti. I reportedly dreamt of waters rising around his palace, prompting him to order new canals dug. Some attribute the move to prophecy, others to simple flood prevention. Historians still debate which motivated action and whether the dream came first. The Sultan's gaze flickers to the open sarcophagus behind you. This curse you've invited into these halls. It's not content to remain beneath its lid. His voice drops to a whisper. I saw a figure rising from the sand, eyes burning. It wore my face. A chill trickles down your spine. The notion of a doppelganger rising from sand is more than legend. It's a motif from Egyptian folklore, warning against prideful rulers. Those who believed themselves invincible risked being replaced by sand-born shadows, forced to wander beneath dunes for eternity. Your Highness, the symbols we saw inside the corridor, they spoke of fractured souls and hungry echoes. If this being is tied to the mummy's pact, it may be forging itself from your essence and the palace's. You glance at the princess, whose steady breathing grounds you both. The Sultan presses a hand to his chest. His robes brush the mosaic floor as he moves toward the balcony window. Beyond, the moon rides high silver light, painting the gardens in ghostly hues. He inhales slowly, as though trying to draw strength from the night air. Every night the dunes call to me, he murmurs, voice catching. I can taste sand when I close my eyes. My throne feels hollow. My crown weighs more than gold should. He shakes his head, a flicker of desperation. What if I am already beneath that sand, but cannot wake? You step forward. Dreams can be doorways. If we bind the spirit properly, we can anchor it, keep it from rising. But you know the risk tampering with such forces could bind you all in unexpected ways. He nods, resignation softening his features. Then bind it, he orders. Bind it and bury it. I will not have my kingdom swallowed. You pause, considering. The princess's solution, binding through sacred words, worked once, but this involves a living soul, the Sultan's own essence. It demands a ritual deeper than stone incantations or salt circles. Your Highness, we need your consent to speak the words of unbinding. They must come from the heart words of humility and service. A ruler's confession, offered willingly, holds more power than any scholar's chant. He closes his eyes. You can almost see the sand pooling beneath his eyelids. I confess, he says, voice trembling. I have ruled with pride. I have commanded without listening. I have placed more trust in sand-colored gold than in the hearts of my people. The princess produces a small scroll, one of the hidden ones you recovered earlier. She holds it open beside the brazier. The lines on the papyrus are shifting, settling into clarity, a litany of humility pledging to protect both living and dead, to honor the balance between worlds. You guide the Sultan's hand, trace the lines. As his fingers move, the brazier's flames flicker green again. The air hums, resonating with his confession. Words coil through the chamber like living threads, binding his spirit to the very palace stones. You feel the ground beneath you pulse. When he finishes, the princess intones the final phrase, an ancient oath of service. You both step back. The air stills. The brazier's glow returns to normal amber. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then outside, a low rumble vibrates through the walls. You hear distant grinding stone on stone. The lid of the sarcophagus clicks shut, sliding until it aligns perfectly. The Sultan exhales, shoulders sagging. It's done. You and the princess exchange a glance. For now, you answer. But curses of the heart do not rest easily. Historians still argue whether spoken oaths hold lasting power or simply delay the inevitable. Only time will tell. He nods, exhaustion giving way to relief. May the sand serve as a reminder, not a prison. You bow slightly. Yes, Your Highness. As you leave the chamber, the princess falls into step beside you. In the corridor, the hieroglyphs on the walls no longer shift, they stand solid, the eye and spiral now frozen in place. The brazier burns steadily, shadows calm. Outside, the desert breeze carries a new promise of balance, restored, if only for a night. You rise before dawn's first light, the palace still cocooned in silence, save for the distant hoot of an owl. The air holds a crisp promise, cold for a desert morning, as if the world itself is bracing for what's coming. The princess stands in the courtyard, wrapped in a woolen cloak that feels out of place under these sands, adjusting the straps on a leather satchel filled with essential scrolls, herbs, a vial of lotus oil, and the heirloom knife that tasted salt from the ritual. A caravan readies beside her. Camels kneel patiently, laden with supplies and guarded by scholars and guides who speak in murmurs of excitement and dread. You notice the map spread across a low wooden table, pathways traced in ochre ink dotted lines leading to the Valley of Wrath, a place whispered about in hushed tones and half-forgotten legends. They say the valley lies beyond the border of the known kingdom, where jagged rock formations cast black shadows at noon, and the wind wails like a lost army. Some maps show it, others blot the area entirely, leaving only empty parchment. Historians still argue whether the Valley of Wrath was ever meant to exist physically, or if it was a metaphor for forbidden knowledge. The princess mounts her camel with effortless grace, and you follow suit. Your camel's saddle creaks in protest, but soon you find a steady rhythm as you all head east, the dunes shifting beneath hooves like a sea in slow motion. The sky lightens from indigo to rose, and the first rays of sun ignite the sands in molten gold. A guide, an old desert scout named Razik, points toward a distant ridge where the terrain darkens unnaturally. There, he says, voice gravelly, where the sun strikes stone, the valley begins. His eyes are sharp, the kind that have seen mirages and known the pain of chasing them. As you travel, the princess unfolds the map and traces her finger along a tributary canyon marked with tiny hieroglyphs. These symbols, she says, are warnings. Turn back. No life beyond nameless gods dwell here. Yet here we are. You offer a small laugh, though nerves prickle your skin. Danger is part of the job description tonight. Quirky fact. Some Bedouin tribes believed the desert was alive with spirits inhabiting every dune and rock. Travelers would leave offerings, dried dates, coins, even fabric scraps to appease them. Historians still argue whether these rituals were superstitious or practical, like marking territory. Hours pass under an uncaring sun. The caravan stops midday for shade under a lone acacia, its feeble branches offering scant relief. You sip water infused with mint and a pinch of salt, the same salt that once held curses at bay, and watch the princess confer with her scholars. They debate which route is safest. The deeper canyon risks rock slides, but the rim path invites murderous winds. I prefer the canyon, she decides. At least walls offer cover, and we need something solid until we reach the heart. You adjust your saddle and rise with the caravan into the narrow gorge. The walls rise steeply patterned with streaks of iron oxide and dark mineral veins. The air here is still almost sacred, and your footsteps echo unnaturally. Somewhere above, a crow caws, and you catch a glimpse of its black silhouette against the sculpted stone. As you advance, the temperature drops an unexpected chill that clings to your bones. You glance at the sky, visible only as a sliver of blue. The sun's warmth seems locked outside this rocky prison. A fine dust drifts through shafts of light, and the particles dance like tiny specters. Suddenly, a distant rumble shakes the ground. The camels bray in alarm. Dust trickles from cracks overhead. Razik gestures urgently. "Rock slide, let's move." You spur your camel forward, heart pounding as a cascade of loose stones tumbles down. The princess urges hers, onward eyes narrowed in focus. You dart through the cloud of grit, inhaling the taste of grit and fear. Behind you, the path partially collapses, but a narrow gap remains, and you all squeeze through. Beyond the blockage, the canyon opens into a vast basin carved into the earth. This is the Valley of Wrath, barren except for defiant rock spires and scattered bleached bones, animal, and you're certain human. Wind-carved ridges rise like tombstones beneath a sky that seems too close. The caravan halts. The guides dismount, scanning the horizon. The princess glances around, expression softening with awe. This place, she whispers, it's as though the world exiled its own heart here. You dismount as well, boots crunching over bone fragments and sand that shifts too easily. A shiver races down your spine. The absence of life is oppressive. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seems hesitant. The scholars unroll another papyrus, marking a spot near a stone archway that juts from the earth like a broken tooth. Here one murmurs, "The entrance to the old temple." If the scroll is correct, the inscriptions inside should match those in the hidden chamber. You and the princess exchange a glance. She nods. Let's see if the mummy's wrath led us here for a reason. Moving together, you approach the archway. Its carved stones are worn smooth by centuries of sand blasting. Faded reliefs depict figures kneeling before a topped jar, perhaps the original vessel, and hieroglyphs warning of souls undone. You press your hand against the cool stone. It hums faintly under your palm, a vibration that tickles your nerves. The princess approaches with a torch, lighting its end with a flint. The flame flickers, casting the archway's carvings into stark relief. Inside, the air is colder, denser, as if the world's weight concentrates here. You step through torch held high, revealing a chamber lined with pillars carved as bundled reeds. Shadows dance across the walls, and the floor tilts gradually downward, leading to a dark corridor. A hush falls over the group, broken only by the soft scrape of sandals on stone. Your heart thumps in sync with each echo. Quirky tidbit ancient Egyptians sometimes built false doors and tombs, carved portals meant to allow the Ka or spirit to move between realms. Scholars debate whether these were symbolic or functional, but here, this archway feels more than ceremonial. Princess pauses at the corridor's entrance, fingers brushing the torchlight across more glyphs. Here, she says, voice low. It matches the script from the hidden scroll, the one about fractured souls. This is exactly where the pact was meant to be sealed. You swallow, stepping forward into the gloom. Every instinct warns that crossing this threshold demands caution and courage born of kinship and necessity. Behind you, the caravan waits silent and expectant. You take a trembling breath, tighten your grip on the torch, and lead the way into the valley's heart. The corridor's air grows colder the deeper you venture, as though you're descending into the world's forgotten breath. Torchlight flickers off carved walls that tell tales of kings offering lifeblood to silent gods, and of vessels meant to carry more than mere bones. You follow the princess into a vast chamber where pillars rise like bundled reeds, their capitals etched with the eye of Duat, now static and watchful. Ahead at the chamber's center stands a stone basin half filled with crystal clear water. Its surface reflects torchlight like fractured glass. The hidden scroll described this as the Mirror of Souls, meant to hold the essence of those who dared risk the pact. Scholars still argue whether it was used for scrying or sacrifice. Here it seems to wait. The princess kneels at the basin's edge and dips a finger into the water. Ripples spread, distorting torch reflections into dancing specters. She glances back at you. If the soul-hungering one draws from living essence, this mirror might trap its reflection, anchor it, so it cannot feed. You kneel beside her, dipping in your own finger. The water is icy sharp as truth. A shudder runs through you. Reflected in its surface, you see not only your face, but the faint shimmer of something behind you, an outline too tall, too narrow, flickering at the edge of sight. Quirky historical note: some Egyptian ritual mirrors were polished so meticulously that priests claimed they could glimpse other realms in their depths. Historians still debate whether such visions were psychoactive effects of incense or genuine metaphysical windows. The princess pulls a small vial of lotus oil from her satchel and drips 3 beads of golden liquid onto the basin's rim. The water darkens briefly, then clears. She recites an incantation found in the hidden scroll words of binding, spoken in a rhythmic cadence that seems to pulse off the stone. As she finishes, the water's surface roils and a vapor rises like soft smoke. The reflected specter in the basin emerges an indistinct shape, shifting between human and something else. Its eyes glow, faintly hungry, searching. It reaches toward you, its form stretching like ink in water. Your heart pounds. The princess leans in, intoning another phrase, a vow of protection, binding the entity's hunger to the reflection alone. The basin's water trembles, and the specter's form stutters, its reaching hand paused at the edge of your lips' reflection. Suddenly, a distant roar vibrates through the chamber. The valley itself seems to rumble. Pillars shiver, dust drifts from the ceiling. The vessel in the sarcophagus back at the palace stirs. You can feel it through the bond you've woven. The specter in the basin lashes out, splashing dark droplets across the stone floor. You flinch, but the princess does not waver. She steps forward, raising her voice. I bind you, O echo of souls, to this glass of living water. You shall hunger here and here only until the weight of your curse is sealed beneath the sands you sought to devour. Her voice resonates, echoing in hushed chords. The specter shudders and begins to collapse inward, folding upon itself, until it becomes a still shape no more than a ripple in the water. The basin's surface calms, reflecting only your and the princess's faces colored by torchlight. You exhale, tension draining from your limbs. Behind you, the path back seems clearer, the way lit by the relieved hush of tremors subsiding. You rise, brushing dust from your knees. The princess offers you a small smile, relief and fatigue mingling in her eyes. We trapped it, she murmurs. You nod, though the mirror's depths still seem to twitch faintly, as if dissatisfied. For now, you remind her. She stands wiping her palms on her robe. We must return this mirror to its place and seal the archway. The valley can't hold more than it's given. Quirky aside, sealing spells often involve drawing false doors in reverse closing rather than opening. Priests would paint a sealed door over the entrance, believing the spirit would mistake it for an exit and remain trapped. Historians still debate whether any of these techniques truly worked, or if their efficacy was purely symbolic. You and the princess perform the ritual tracing symbols in the dust around the basin, reciting counter-incantations in measured tones. The basin's water returns to stillness, its surface smooth like polished obsidian. Together, you retrace your steps through the temple's dark corridors, trailing torches that dim as you retire to the open air. Outside, the Valley of Wrath stretches silent under a sky now spangled with stars. The caravan awaits silent but vigilant. The guides step forward, their faces a mixture of awe and wonder. As you mount your camel beside the princess, you glance back at the archway. Its carved stones seem to sigh, settling into stillness. The eye of Duat stares unblinking, as if acknowledging the bond you forged and the promise to hold. You settle into the saddle, the world's breath around you seeming a bit lighter. The princess looks up at the sky, whispering a soft word of thanks to the old sun. and together you begin the journey home, each step carrying the weight of oaths kept and curses bound. The caravan's return journey is quiet, each rider lost in reflection after the valley's uncanny hush. As dawn stretches pink fingers across the sky, you and the princess find yourselves passing a small desert settlement where stone huts huddle around a sun-baked well. The villagers pause their chores to watch your procession, eyes wide with a mix of reverence and unease. Word travels fast in these parts. Stories of the mummy's wrath and your midnight expedition have preceded you like a desert wind carrying sand. You dismount and follow the princess into the settlement's modest shrine, a circular enclosure of low walls built around a sun disk carved from limestone. At its center stands an old woman draped in saffron robes, her skin like parchment etched by decades of sun and sand. She kneels before a stone altar, scattering millet and date offerings as the first sunlight glints off a copper chalice. This is the priestess of the old sun, a living link to traditions the palace long ago relegated to myth. Historically, solar priestesses were charged with maintaining the ritual flame that symbolized Ra's daily rebirth. Some rites involved singing hymns at dawn to coax the sun into the sky, prayers that lasted until the first ray crested the eastern dunes. Historians still argue whether these rituals held genuine metaphysical power or were elaborate ceremonies reinforcing royal authority. The priestess lifts her head, sharp blue eyes locking onto the princess. You carry sand in your blood, she intones her voice like wind over stones. You've awakened what sleeps beneath the dunes. You must offer the sun's mercy to calm the mummy's fury. You kneel watching as she dips her hand into the copper chalice, lifting water laced with crushed chamomile and saffron, an ancient blend meant to symbolize light-dissolving darkness. She anoints the princess's forehead with 3 precise drops, one for life, one for death, and one for rebirth. The scent of saffron and honey drifts between you, warm and sweet. Quirky tidbit: some desert cultures believed that saffron harvested from highland blooms carried the sun's essence so precious that a single strand might fetch its weight in silver. Historians still debate the extent to which saffron was used in rituals versus limited trade to royal courts. The priestess hands the princess a polished obsidian mirror, its frame inscribed with barely legible glyphs. He who looks upon himself in truth shall show the path for the lost. She explains that this mirror once guided souls through Duat's shadowed halls, reflecting a person's true nature so they might walk the sunlit land again. According to local lore, this mirror could also scorch deceitful spirits, with its own reflection driving them back into their tomb. The princess turns the mirror so it catches the rising sun, then holds it before you. For a moment, your reflection flickers and shifts. Your eyes glow with a golden spark, not your own. You catch a glimpse of the mummy's hollow stare overlaying your features before the image snaps back to normal. A jolt of energy crackles through your arm where the mirror's edge rests like static from unseen wires. Your reflection revealed the burden you carry, the priestess says softly. The mummy reaches for what you bring, the living spark of renewal. Without the sun's blessing, its wrath would consume both flesh and soul. You nod, heart hammering. The princess takes the mirror and gazes into it thoughtfully, then closes her eyes. She intones a brief chant in archaic Egyptian, a plea to Ra for forgiveness and guidance. The mirror's surface ripples like desert heat, rising and then stills, reflecting only the two of you in calm, steady light. A hush settles over the shrine. The priestess murmurs, "The sun has heard." She places a hand on each of your shoulders. Carry this mercy back to the palace. Let the first light cleanse what darkness has stained. Mainstream historical note: Pharaoh Akhenaten once redirected Egypt's worship entirely to the Aten, the sun disk, abandoning traditional gods. His reign ended abruptly, and subsequent rulers erased his name from monuments debated by historians as either a political purge or theological backlash. Yet the power of solar worship endured in hidden shrines like this one. The princess bows deeply to the priestess, then stands and turns to you with a quiet smile. "We have the sun's grace," she says. "Now we must face the flames." You mount your camel as the villagers return to their daily tasks, offerings left undisturbed and the shrine's stones glowing gold in the morning light. The road back to the palace seems shorter under this new blessing. Ahead, the palace gates rise against the horizon. Soon, you will confront the final trial, the mummy's trial by fire. But for now, the sun warms your face, and hope flickers as surely as the dawn. By midday, the palace courtyard blazes under the sun's relentless gaze, the heat clinging to you like a second skin. The princess and you stand before a brazier larger than any you've seen, a towering iron cauldron perched on 3 sculpted jackal legs. Flames dance within blue and gold, untouched by gusts of wind. This is the trial by fire, an ancient rite thought to purify spirits and burn away curses. Courtiers encircle the brazier at a cautious distance, their faces lined with expectation. The Sultan stands nearby, regal even in his concern, his robes lighter now bound by the humility he confessed. Guards hold salt and barley, a symbol of earth and sustenance, ready to cast into the flames when the time comes. The princess steps forward, carrying the obsidian mirror gifted by the priestess of the old sun. She positions it at the brazier's edge so its reflective surface catches the firelight. The mirror's frame glints its glyphs, almost breathing beneath the heat. According to legend, the mirror will transect deceit and weakness, reflecting only what's true. Historians still argue if such trials were real or invented later to dramatize rulers' piety. Some records describe ashes said to cure blindness. Others dismiss them as theatrical spectacle. But here, you sense something more potent than politics. The princess lifts the copper chalice of saffron water, offering 3 drops into the fire as an invocation of life, death, and rebirth. The flames shudder, then roar higher, turning a brilliant white at the core. Sparks spiral upward, leaving trails like fiery comets. This fire accepts offerings of truth, the princess intones, voice steady. I present the mirror of souls and the sun's mercy. Witness the unbinding. She holds the obsidian mirror closer, its surface glowing, until you see not your reflection, but the swirling image of a relic silver scarab sealed sarcophagus flooded with green flame. As you watch, the mirror's vision shifts, revealing the mummy's wrappings, scorched and frayed. Then a shadowy figure rising within the flames, arms outstretched as though welcoming combustion. Your heart hammers. Flames crackle in response, sending heat licks that scorch the soles of your sandals. Yet the mirror remains unwarmed, a cool black surface amid inferno. The princess whispers an oath, invoking Ra's name, and calling on the mummy's vessel to relinquish its ancient hunger. The mirror vibrates in her hands, emitting a low hum that resonates through the courtyard. You feel it in your chest, as if your own pulse synchronizes with the mirror's chant. Suddenly, a wind sweeps through the courtyard, unusual in its coolness. It rushes toward the brazier, extinguishing torches, but feeding the open flames. The fire blazes higher, then implodes inward, forming a pillar of light that spirals toward the sky. From within, a figure emerges, a phantom enveloped in burning linens, wings of smoke unfurling like banners. The mummy's form, at last freed from mere linen and stone, stands upright in the heart of the fire, its head tilts, gaze fixed on the princess. The crowd gasps. Guards step back on instinct, swords at the ready, though blades mean little here. The Sultan's face shadows with fear and awe. The princess raises the mirror. The obsidian surface flashes white-hot, then reflects the figure in perfect clarity. Every charred fold of cloth, every ember that clings to its form. The phantom recoils as though struck by its own image. A hush falls. Then the princess steps forward into the circle of cooled air that surrounds the mirror's influence. Return, she commands, in the old tongue, words you recognize from the hidden scroll. Return to wrappings bound and blessed, that hunger may find its rest. The phantom stirs its arms, sweeping through the air. Flames lick the courtyard floor, but the circle around the princess and mirror remains calm. The figure's linen drifts reel as if underwater, then begin to reweave themselves back onto its frame, layer by layer, until the specter becomes a solid form, the mummy wrapped again. But now the wrappings glow faintly with saffron gold veins. With a final shudder, the mummy staggers backward and collapses into the brazier, which absorbs it like a pit of quiet embers. The fires die, leaving only smoldering ash that glows softly. The princess and you step forward together. She closes her eyes and sprinkles salt and barley over the ember symbols of Earth's endurance and life's renewal. The ash settles into the brazier's base, leaving a smooth, dark surface. The crowd remains silent, processing what they witnessed. The Sultan kneels, pressing his palm into the ash. "May this remind us that power, tempered by truth, endures," he murmurs. You realize the trial by fire, once thought theatrical, served as the final binding. Historians still debate whether any ashes from such rituals truly healed, but here they've sealed a pact older than dynasties. As the princess places the now cool mirror into a velvet satchel, she looks at you with tired triumph. "It's done." You nod, voice hushed. The mummy's wrath is quenched. The Sultan rises, offering both of you gratitude. "You've saved us all. But you know, such miracles demand vigilance. Curses bound may slumber, but they never die entirely." Together, under the high sun, you retreat from the brazier's remains, embers cool as stone, ready to restore the mummy to its rightful rest, and finally lay the past to peace. Twilight falls like a whispered promise as you return to the palace, the sky painted in bruised purples and gold. The courtyard is quiet now, the brazier's ashes swept away, the obsidian mirror safely sheathed, and the sarcophagus relocked its scarab seal, glinting with a finality you've earned. Lanterns glow along the corridors, casting gentle pools of light that no longer tremble with unseen currents. You and the princess walk side by side toward the daughter's chamber, each step echoing softly on the mosaic floors. The air carries the lingering scent of saffron and lotus, a reminder of every ritual that led you here. Despite the trials, there's a calm you both feel. The palace seems to breathe easier, as though a great weight has been lifted. She pauses at the door to her room, turning to you with a tired smile. "We brought back more than the mirror," she says. "We returned balance." Inside, moonlight spills across her desk, where the forbidden scroll lies rewrapped in silk. She unwraps it, revealing hieroglyphs now stable and unmoving, the words resting where they should no longer alive with restless energy. The script reads simply, "Here sleeps the pact." You trace the phrase with your fingertip, a pact laid to rest. Quirky tidbit. In some royal tombs, contracts between pharaohs and priests were inscribed on papyrus and buried alongside the deceased agreements meant to last an eternity. Historians still debate whether these were binding covenants or symbolic gestures of political faith. The princess leans back on her cushions and motions for you to sit beside her. "Thank you," she whispers. "I couldn't have done this without you." You shrug, feeling the weight of her gratitude more than your own exhaustion. "We did it together." She uncorks a small vial of lavender oil and lets a single drop fall into a copper dish. The scent spreads, weaving through the chamber like a soothing lullaby. You inhale deeply, every muscle in your body sinking into relaxation. Outside the palace, guards resume their posts, but their eyes no longer dart with fear. Instead, they stand with steady hearts, confident that the darkness has been pushed back for now. The princess closes her journal, where she's been sketching the journey in delicate ink drawings. You peek at one page, a stylized scarab, a mirror, a brazier aflame, and two simple figures walking side by side under a star-studded arch. Underneath, she's scrawled, "Balance restored through unity." Historians still argue whether stories of royalty and the supernatural were meant as moral tales or secret records of real magic. But here, in this quiet moment, the line between myth and truth has blurred until it no longer matters. You rise, heading for the door. She lifts her hand. "One more thing," she says softly. You turn curious. She produces a tiny alabaster jar, no bigger than a thimble sealed with wax. From the valley, she explains. A gift from the desert sands, blessed by the sun, imbued with mercy and vigilance. She presses the jar into your palm. The jar is cool, smooth. You feel its weight small but significant. "Keep it close," she instructs. A reminder that even buried curses can be held in check as long as we remember our promises. You nod, tucking the jar into your satchel. It seems to hum faintly against your side, a heartbeat echoing the journey you've shared. She leans forward, resting her head on the cushions, eyes heavy. Now she murmurs, "It's time to truly sleep." You stand smoothing your robe. "Sweet dreams," you reply, half to her, half to the palace itself. You step into the corridor. The gentle hum of the fan she asked you to turn on earlier stirs the air. Lanterns glow softly. Shadows rest peacefully. You pause at the threshold, glancing back. She's already drifting into slumber, the lavender oil working its magic. The forbidden scroll lies still, the jar of blessed sand shining softly in the moonlight. You close the door quietly, and as you walk down the hall, back into the world outside this tale, you carry with you a story of curses and compassion, of fear faced and bonds forged, and of promises kept beneath desert stars. Tonight, the palace tomb beneath the throne room feels like a living dream. You follow the princess down a polished ramp of black basalt, the walls lined with urns and statues of jackals and ibis, their stone eyes glinting in your torchlight. The air is cool, perfumed by faint traces of myrrh and something sweeter, an echo of lotus petals long since crumbled. At the chamber's heart stands the sarcophagus, its lid sealed once more, the scarab emblem gleaming saffron gold in the torch's flicker. Yet the princess does not hesitate. She steps forward, shoulders squared, her silhouette framed by hieroglyphs that tell of kings who bargained with gods, some trading kingdoms for eternal life, others losing both in vain hope. You remain beside her torch, held low senses heightened. The tomb's hush presses against your ears, broken only by soft drips of condensation from unseen crevices. Somewhere deeper, a fan of stone wind channels a faint draft, an imperceptible breath, as if the palace itself exhales beneath your feet. The princess kneels before the sarcophagus, placing both hands on its cool stone. She speaks in a voice steady yet solemn, reciting an oath older than any you've uttered, an offering of her own life force to seal the ancient hunger, once and for all. By blood of royalty and humility confessed, she intones, I offer my essence to bind the fractured soul within these wrappings. Take my spark in exchange for peace, that none may suffer hunger's wrath again. A shiver courses through the air. The scarab seal pulses faintly at first, then pulses in a slow, deliberate rhythm like a heartbeat echoing through stone. A soft golden light seeps from the emblem's edges, spreading in veins across the lid until the surface glows like smoothed amber. Quirky tidbit. In some New Kingdom tombs, princesses were buried with ceremonial knives and locks of hair believed to serve as offerings for afterlife guardians. Historians still argue whether these items were actual concessions or symbolic tokens to appease spirits. You watch, breath caught as the glow intensifies. The princess's palms lean into the lid, her fingers tracing the scarab's wings. You sense her commitment, a bond stronger than any iron seal. Suddenly, a low rumble vibrates the floor. Dust settles from the ceiling. The sarcophagus lid trembles and then imperceptibly shifts downward, as if willing to accept the bargain. A wisp of golden mist curls from the crack, rising like incense smoke before dispersing into the tomb's darkness. Historians still argue whether such spirit-binding rituals ever truly liberated the dead or merely delayed the inevitable awakening. Here, though you feel the shift in weight, the oppressive hunger that once lurked within the wrappings has subsided, replaced by a calm resonance that hums beneath your skin. The princess exhales, her head bowed. She touches the scarab again, whispering a closing phrase. Rest now, echo of ages. Your hunger ends with this promise. The light fades. The seal returns to its placid gleam. The tomb falls silent, peaceful, patient. You rise heart-pounding and brace yourself for the price of her pledge. But the princess stands easily, a faint smile on her lips. Her life essence offered in spirit has bound the curse without dimming her vitality. You marvel, recalling the perilous balance between sacrifice and salvation. Mainstream fact: ancient Egyptians often placed opening of the mouth ceremonies in tombs, intended to awaken the senses of the deceased so they could partake in offerings. Historians still debate whether this ritual was purely symbolic or believed to have literal power. She turns to you, eyes bright. The pact sleeps, she says softly. And so do I. You both ascend the ramp, stepping from darkness into torchlit calm. The palace seems lighter, freer of ancient weight. Outside the tomb, guards nod respectfully. The air in the hallway feels bracing, as though the tomb's peace has rippled upward. You realize that sometimes bargains with the dead demand courage unmatched by any sword. And tonight, the princess matched that courage and more. You wake to a strange hush, the air thick with shifting sand, and the scent of petrichor from last night's faint dew. The palace you fought so hard to save lies buried beneath dunes so high they stretch like silent waves toward the horizon. Only the highest minarets peek through the ochre sea, slender fingers pointing to a forgotten sky. The princess and you stand atop a gentle rise, robes trailing in the breeze, watching as the desert reclaims the stones of Zahir's rest. Courtiers and guards stumble from the caravan, blinking against the glare disbelief etched on their faces. Camels huff softly, hooves settling in fresh sand, their riders steadying in unsteady terrain. Historians still argue whether ancient structures lost to the sands were buried by time or deliberate curse. Here, though, you see the truth, a palace spared from wrath, but surrendered to the land's quiet appetite. The princess kneels and brushes the surface with her hand, uncovering a single mosaic tile, blue and gold, carved with a lotus blossom. She lifts it, curiosity softening her grief. Even grand things fade, she whispers, but fragments remain. You recall the trials, the pact bound beneath fire, the mirror of souls, the priestess's blessing at dawn. Those rituals saved the palace from malevolent forces, but they could not stop nature's own reclamation. The desert, after all, is neither cruel nor kind, it simply endures. Together, you walk toward a meandering channel of melted sandstone that leads to the buried courtyard. The occasional tip of a column shaft or the curve of a collapsed arch gleams in the sunlight. Each exposed ruin is a testament to days gone by and promises kept. You stop at the mosque's dome, half buried, its brass crescent ring shining like a lone memory. Somewhere beneath the sand, hidden rooms still hold the scarab seal and the obsidian mirror, silent guardians of the pact laid to rest. As you stand in the hollow where the throne once stood, the princess places the lotus tile beside a small depression in the sand. She sprinkles blessed desert grains from the alabaster jar across the tile, an offering of remembrance and vigilance. Quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptians sometimes included small foundation deposits in building corners, tiny amulets, food, and oils placed beneath stones so that if buildings ever crumbled, these objects would speak of origin. Historians still debate whether these were symbolic or meant to anchor spirit protectors here. Your lotus tile and desert sands honor that tradition. A single breeze stirs, and where the princess's tears fall upon the tile, a green shoot pushes through the sand, a lotus sprig, delicate yet unyielding. Its petals unfurl toward the sky, vibrant against the muted dunes. You and the princess exchange a look of wonder. This, she says softly, is hope. You kneel beside her, hands cupped around the fragile bloom. Sunlight warms your skin. The world feels both immense and intimately connected by time's ebb and flow. Together, you rise. The caravan prepares to depart, but you remain a moment longer, honoring the silent palace beneath its sandy shroud. The lotus sways, a sentinel of memory, reminding the desert that even buried stories can bloom again. And with that promise, you follow the princess back to the path, back to the living world, where tales of curses and courage become legends whispered under desert stars. The desert night settles softly, its velvet darkness studded with pinpoints of distant firelight. You and the princess walk side by side, the cool sand giving beneath your feet, each step a gentle rhythm in the hush. In the quiet that follows thunderous trials, every breath feels profound, as though the world itself is exhaling in contentment. The lotus's fragile bloom rests safe in your pack, its memory a tender echo of resilience. Picture its slender stem swaying, petals opening like a lullaby for the land, reminding you that even in the vastest emptiness, life finds a way to emerge soft and determined. Feel the gentle wind against your skin, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine and cooling your thoughts. Let your mind drift through the steps you've taken, the mirror's hum, the brazier's roar, the silent pact beneath moonlit courts. Each memory settles like sand in a jar, layers of courage, sacrifice, and unity interwoven into a shared story. Know that the terrible hunger of ancient wrath has found its rest. The palace beneath the sand stands silent, its secrets safe beneath nature's embrace. And you, wanderer, companion of the princess, hold in your heart the promise that bonds forged in truth endure beyond ruin and reclaim. As your eyelids grow heavy, imagine setting down your satchel, unfastening the jar of blessed sand, and letting a whisper of night air brush across the lotus petals. The world pauses in that breath, offering peace. Now sink into your pillows. Allow the hush of this tale to cradle your thoughts, and let sleep gather you gently, weaving sand and stars into dreams where every ending becomes the seed of a new beginning. Sweet dreams.